My name is Kayla Jones,
And my name is Nicolette Higgs.
and we are going to explain the Lean Agile methodology. So, what is Lean? It is a method that is specifically focused on the process that delivers a product. It helps improve efficiency by eliminating waste, strives to reduce all tasks and activities that do not provide real value in order to ensure that everyone working with a project can work efficiently. And Lean is intended to be applied to repetitive process with the intent to improve the process in order to make a better product. So how did this product or this method come about? It was originally a manufacturing method that was intended to help improve profits by reducing costs. It really emerged in the automotive industry. It can be seen as early as the 1920s with Henry Ford. The assembly line and production process were some of the first of their kind to implement continuous improvement. And then really post-war 1940s Toyota is kind of seen as the poster child for the lean process. Their practices really embraced efficient technology use to carry cost reduction. And it also really understood the value of their factory workers at Toyota and allowed workers to make decisions and improvements without permission. For the advantages of the lean method, it does help reduce costs. It improves customer relationships. It increases quality, and it can be applied to other approaches and development methods. The way that it really helps reduce costs is to maximize profits. Since you want your product to be good quality, companies that use this method are able to control their costs better. And by decreasing their costs, they can add those savings back into their profit. Improving customer interactions is done by looking at the customer's viewpoint. They really work on communicating with customers, doing surveys and things like that. And with a big attention to detail, it really improves customer relationships overall. And with looking at attention to detail, that's really how you can increase quality. The goal of lean is to decrease the number of defects and reworks. And so this really avoids mistakes. So that saves times for the workers since they're not having to remake products. Some disadvantages are that it's best used for routine, repeatable operations. It is not considered to be quick or very flexible. It requires everyone involved in a project to be trained on how to use the method, and it can often be considered too rigid. Really looking at how it's used for routine and repeatable operations, that can limit what it can be used for. And often workers that are having this implemented, it can be difficult for the change for them, and can also be stressful. And it does take a lot of time because it requires a complete overhaul of the manufacturing process specifically. So companies do need to sometimes take a long-term approach to establish necessary systems to really put lean in place.
So to get into what industries utilize lean, like Kayla mentioned, there are industries that use repetitive processes to mass produce items. So thinking like auto industry or tech industry, companies that make construction equipment or retail. And some of these are familiar like Toyota, John Deere, Intel, Caterpillar, and Nike. And now we're actually going to get into how the lean methodology is used in practice with a video on Toyota's Toyota production system.
Toyota knows how to make cars. It does it so well, it became the first company to produce more than 10 million a year. Its success is rooted in a special system and began what's now known as lean manufacturing, an ethos emulated by companies around the world to make products faster, cheaper, and better. Here's how Toyota changed the way we make things. Following the Second World War, Japan was left in a precarious economic position.
Steel and other metals are scarce.
Already disadvantaged by lacking natural resources, materials were hard to come by, and companies had to be creative to compete. Toyota's founder, Sekichi Toyoda, had started a loom business, but it was his son Kichiro who founded the motor company in 1937. They were used to working within narrow margins. As the shortage of materials increased during the war, the number of headlamps on its Model K truck was reduced to one, and it only had brakes on one of the axles. The turning point for Toyota's production system would come in the early 50s, when Kichiro's cousin Eiji would travel to the US with a veteran loom machinist, Taiichi Ono. They visited Ford's River Rouge plant in Michigan and were impressed by the scale of the operation, but knew that in cash-strapped Japan, companies didn't have the resources for such a system. Having months' worth of stock sitting in a warehouse would tie up precious capital they didn't have. Instead, what truly impressed Ono was a visit to a supermarket, a Piggly Wiggly, according to legend. Japan didn't really have self-service stores at this point, and he was struck by the way customers could choose exactly what they wanted, when they wanted. He decided to model his production line on a similar idea. With the supermarket formula, only enough parts were produced in the first phase to replace what was used in the second, and so on. This is where the just-in-time system really took shape. Toyota was able to eliminate much of the waste in Ford's system, making smaller numbers of parts to be used when it needed them, allowing the company to operate on a tighter budget. As part of this, Ono developed Kanban, a sign-based scheduling method which shows goods in production, and goods out. It's now seen as a precursor to barcodes. Ono and Toyota also noticed that American car companies were still employing many of Henry Ford's early production techniques. They kept operations at full tilt in order to maximize efficiencies of scale, but then had to repair defective cars after they rolled off the line. Ono believed this caused more problems and didn't encourage workers or machines to stop making the mistake. So he placed a cord above every station which any worker could pull to stop the entire assembly if they spotted a problem. The whole team would work on it to prevent it from happening again. As teams identified more problems, the number of errors began to drop dramatically. Combined with a culture of continuous incremental improvement called Kaizen, the Toyota production system built a brand known for making reliable and affordable cars. But Toyota was also getting good at producing cars quickly. In 1962, the company had produced 1 million vehicles. By 1972, they'd produced 10 million. It was around that time that the efficiencies of their factories enabled Toyota to produce a car every 1.6 man-hours, much lower than their competitors in the US, Sweden, and Germany. And as the oil crises of the decade sent gas prices higher, cheap-to-run Japanese cars became much more appealing to Americans, whose powerful but gas-guzzling vehicles suddenly became very expensive to run. Today, Toyota has made over 250 million vehicles. Others have looked to them to learn the lessons of lean, combining craft with mass production, avoiding waste while striving for constant improvement. Boeing is perhaps the most famous, restructuring a plant to better suit TPS. Intel is another long-time lean ambassador and is exploring the principles in the context of AI and the Internet of Things. A Canadian hospital even used Toyota's system to decrease wait times in its ER. The Toyota production system changed not just how cars are made globally, but how we approach making things full stop. It also showed that there's always a better way to make a product.
So now to see more about lean in practice, we're going to go into how some of the companies that I mentioned in the previous slide use the method. So Intel is in the creation of computer processors and chips, and this process is something that really requires zero to no bugs. Previously, they created a high quantity of products. They created a lot of things, but they tended to be low quality, which resulted in low customer satisfaction. And once they shifted to the lean method, to quality control and waste reduction, they improved quality and customer satisfaction. John Deere operates with a fully automated QC system for quality control, and the system checks for more defective parts in a short period of time. which helps them supply more items to customers at a lower price. And this prevents them from producing items in surplus. Nike's also focused on less waste and higher customer value, and this has actually helped them reduce poor labor practices in their manufacturing offices overseas by 15%. And this shows that they're trying to put more value into their employees. So lean in theory, the New England Journal of Medicine wrote an article about how healthcare could actually use the 8 ways of lean methodology to improve workflows in the healthcare system. So number one, the first waste list in the waste lean methodology is to prevent idle time. So this would be reducing the time the patients spend in the waiting room, stopping employees from milling about or being on standby, or having idle high-tech equipment running. Number two is to minimize inventory, reducing surplus of supplies like medication, or entering extra data that's not needed for a patient. And this is to help train employees to recognize excess in these areas. Number three involves eradicating defects like reducing system failures or medical mistakes or misdiagnoses or erroneous medical records. Number four is to reduce transportation. So this is decreasing the movement of patients, supplies, and equipment around the hospital. Number five is to reduce motion, specifically for employees. When they're dealing with patients, they tend to be lifting or moving or adjusting things all the time. And if they injure themselves, that's also not beneficial to the patient. Number six is involving maximizing resources by minimizing healthcare overproduction. So this involves a duplication of tests or having a hospital patient stay there at the hospital longer than they need to. Number seven involves removing waste from overprocessing. And this is reducing extra work needed to care for patients for employees, like filling out forms they don't need or performing data entry in the same system more than once. And number eight is focused on unutilized talent. So if employees are focusing on numbers 1 through 7 that I was just talking about, it takes away from the time that they could use to build better relationships with their patients, educate themselves further in the medical field, or it stops them from focusing on improving the systems that they currently work in. So to compare lean to other methods, the Kanban method, the function of that is to address surplus and shortage in real time by regulating the supply of raw material. And the goals for this are eliminating waste with just-in-time manufacturing, refraining from producing a surplus, and reducing multitasking. So they'll limit themselves from working on more than one item or project at a time. In Scrum, this is based on management through teams. So a small team will coordinate with about 3 people to complete a task. And the task will be completed in a time frame of a sprint, which is about 2 to 4 weeks. And within that time frame, they'll meet daily to assess any problems that they're seeing. In the dynamic system development method, this is based on rapid prototyping and iteration based in user feedback. This requires strict monitoring of cost, quality, and it has a lot of time constraints. And priorities are grouped into categories of must-haves, should-haves, could-haves, and won't-haves. And in extreme programming, this is focused on the quality and immediate feedback of delivered software. So the customer is present throughout the entire process, and it relies on short development cycles. So said customer can be there to constantly give feedback at the request of what they need. So in terms of compatibility with other methods, lean works best with the Kanban method, and the Kanban method is actually used within lean. Within the lean method, you have 4 steps, and step 4 is establishing pull. And pull ensures that items are made to order based on actual consumption, and it reduces waste. And Kanban aids in this process through a really good visualization of the project's workflow. And the combination of lean and Kanban balances development workflow with quality. And as you can see below, we have charts showing the steps for lean. And then on the right, the Kanban board shows goods in, goods that are work in progress, and the goods that are sent out. So that completes our presentation. So let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.